Yugioh budget tier list post magnificent Mavens. Today, I am going to be going over the top budget strategies and ranking them all the way from S tier to if you should probably just pay the bills instead. Now keep in mind, every single one of these strategies are considered budget decks, so I am going to be ranking them on how effective that they will be inside of this November format. Let's go ahead and jump on in. As you guys can see, the ultimate categories and of course everyone's favorite, pay the bills instead. Let's go ahead and start off with Dino. Dino would unfortunately be in the C tier, and the reason why I would say Dino would be a C tier deck is because of Miscellaneous Ceres. If this card comes at anything more than one, there are also cards like Dino Wrestler Pinkertops, which would be considered a slightly worse cash tier of Finra, but would be searchable for Dinos, which would help increase this deck's power. But until then, I feel that it is a solid C tier deck. Being able to play into those later turns for Yugioh is extremely important, and with only one Misk and one Pankratops, that will be a area that this deck will struggle. Invoked, you'll pay the bills instead. Look, I'm gonna level with you guys. There's gonna be a lot, and I mean a lot of players that are going to use the bestial monsters inside of their deck. And with that being said, you don't want to normal summon Alistair, link it off an activated invocation, only to lose your Alistair to a bestial monster. Also, if you wanted to play an invoke deck that would maybe be here in terms of power, you would have to play the bestial monsters, which would include Bestial Lubellion, which would put you out of the budget range. Next would be Amazonas. Now, if we're talking about
an Amazonas swordswoman, just crush me with your thighs just one time. Look, I am not that guy normally, but for a swordswoman,
that would easily put Amazonas in the S tier, but since we're talking about budget and powerful budget decks, yeah, pay the bills instead. Now, I do like the new cards that Amazonas got from the Darkwing Blast set, but unfortunately, I don't think it's enough to be better than some of the other budget decks that we're going to be talking about, such as Blackwings. Now, I did put Blackwings in my top budget decks this format, but I did exclude a lot of strategies that were well known as budget decks. It's still a very solid A tier budget deck. But what I've been seeing, players have been playing a lot less Nibiru to Primal Being, which is this deck's worst enemy. In turn, they have been playing cards like Dark Ruler No More, which is also this deck's worst enemy, but you could still build a board and hold your resources under Dark Ruler No More, and then there's still the new trap card that allows you to synchro summon on your opponent's turn, so yes, there's still hope with this deck. My best advice for Blackwing players is not to go out and make the biggest board you can make, reducing your extra deck resources and your hand resources, but to make a moderable board that'll allow you to play in the later turns. Crystal Beast, oh my god, sometimes you really can't argue with the price point. It's $30, but if we're talking about just power, all of these are budget, it's a solid B. Not necessarily a terrible structure deck. I can show you terrible structure decks. The Egyptian God cards, the Charmers, Layer of Darkness. Now, I know I wrestled a lot of players' jimmies by saying those structure decks, but statistically, they're just not good. This one, you get Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring inside of it, and it's not a bad control deck. Unfortunately, Ignister, I would put in, it's like, I would put it in the C tier. As you should know right now, hand traps are not as strong. I have a hand trap tier list to be able to show you what are the best hand traps, but there's not a lot of S tier hand traps. With that being said, the significance of Ignister has taken a hit, and with players playing Lava Golem inside of their main decks and their sideboard, losing your Arrival Ignister monster would be devastating. I don't think that it's a bad deck whatsoever. You can still pick up this deck and play it very well, but understand that the format is against you right now. Owlbaz. Oh man, budget Owlbaz. We don't have the Bestials, but it is still a very good budget deck. The biggest unfortunate thing is that if you are playing Owlbaz, is if your opponent is playing the Bestial monsters, you can almost guarantee the monster that you target with Branded in Red will be banished with a Bestial. This essentially means that your standard Branded in Red combo, forget about it. Figure something else out with Despia, probably just Scythe locking with Branded Explosion, since they can't Bestial that. True Draco, we're gonna go ahead and put True Draco in. Look guys, it is a $30 Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I actually have a deck profile if you guys want to check it out. But with that exact same $30, you can buy a Crystal Beast Structured X, or you can buy Owlbaz Structured X. I mean, to be honest, we could probably say that it's C tier because I do think it's slightly better than these decks. But Zombie World, guys, yeah, pay the bills instead. The bestial monsters are your worst enemy. That is all. Drytron, well, the problem with Drytron will be, I'm gonna keep saying this, the bestial monsters, but it's a pretty solid budget deck. Drytron also does get a little bit worse from the Ishizu cards if they shuffle them back into your deck because you want them in your graveyard. But the thing that I love about Drytron is being able to take your opponent's monsters with Cyber Angel Natasha. If you can make the games as quick as possible with Drytron, then yeah, you could steal some games here. It's a solid budget deck. Outlich is pretty much in the exact same train as Drytron's, almost the exact same rules apply. The best version of Outlich, in my opinion, will probably be a more pure build geared with cards like Inspector Border inside of the main board so you can dodge the bestial monster and also punish your opponent from playing Tier Limit and the Ishizu cards. Heroes. I'm gonna put heroes in the I think heroes are a solid A tier budget deck. Me, broken record, but Masked Hero Darklaw is yeah, that's a good card. If you first turn summon a Masked Hero Darklaw and protect it, how is Tier Limit and Ishizu cards going to play? The only problem is against Sprite. You kind of like, yeah, they still play. But at least you know they won't be making Totally Awesome against you, but Destiny Hero Plasma can very much get you in the game against Sprite. They can't handle it, and it's the reason why Tier Limit players will side in Skill Drain. Exo Stepsisters are easily an S tier deck. Hey, Exo Stepsis, our parents are on a vacation. You wanna, you lonely? Exo Sister is one of the better Yu-Gi-Oh decks to incorporate Mystic Mind because of Exo Sister Carpe Diem being able to negate it, and also takes full advantage of not using the graveyard with cards like Necro Valley and can trigger its effect from the bestial monsters. Fluendareese is another S tier Yu-Gi-Oh budget deck. This is just simply one of the most powerful decks in the format. A deck that doesn't need its graveyard, doesn't special summon, and can also lock your opponent that summons attack position monsters that are special summoned. Sheesh. There's also Heartbeat's Featherstorm, a card that yeah, that card's stupid. For Fur Hire, it's been a lot of players that have been contacting me saying that I put it in the wrong spot, but I'm 100% sure they're furries. I'd rather pay the bills instead. Now look, I ain't gonna cap. Zootopia had your boy thinking, like, it had your boy thinking. But every iteration of Fur Hire that I hear, it always involves the better deck. Fur Hire Sprite, just play Sprite. Fur Hire Tri-Brigade, just play Tri-Brigade. In no instance do I ever hear Fur Hire as a pure deck or Fur Hire as a deck that wouldn't be better off as the other counterpart as a good deck. But on the bright side, I think all of the Fur Hire cards are ridiculously cheap. So, I mean, it's worth getting. Labyrinth Mommies. A lot of people say that this deck is not budget, but in actuality, we actually had a couple of people tell me how much they got their deck for on stream, and it was around that $100 price tag. That's budget.
Step on me, Labyrinth Mommy. Yo!
This is one of my favorite decks because it does incorporate normal trap cards. Then there are cards like Fiend Griefing that allows you to shuffle in important Tier Limit monsters, your opponent's Ishizu cards, monsters that your opponent is probably targeting with Sprite Elf. It also sends cards like Backjack into the graveyard. I think that there are a lot of normal trap cards that this deck takes full advantage of, and currently it's looking like the best trap deck in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Earth Machine, boys. Solid B. Now there is something that Earth Machine does fairly decent, and they're mostly Earth monsters. You never would have guessed. Bestials can't hit you. This is also a deck that doesn't need its extra deck. It can summon huge monsters to the side of the field without accessing it. This deck's going second capabilities and floodgates that you can play are pretty good. I think it's a solid budget deck, especially since it's one of the cheaper decks out of all these budget decks. Marine Cess is S tier. If you guys did not see my top 5 video, basically, World Sea Dragon Zealantis is support for Marine Cess. As long as you're locked into water, your opponent can't summon any monsters out of water when you Zealantis them. I'm gonna put Math Mech in the struggle bust right now. I think that the bestial monsters hit this one a little bit harder than some of the other decks. Because the monsters that you want to special summon with Math Mech Diameter are light monsters. They can always chain to bestials. Hand traps aren't as good. And Super Factorial can get disrupted by bestials too. I think that these are easily S tier decks in the correct format. And pretty much all of these decks, all the way to C tier, and Tweener, Furhire, and Invoked could be decks that you could actually still build and have success with. It would just be an easier path to pick S or A or even B before picking C or pay to bills instead. Naturia really depends on where those Ishizu cards are going to sit, but I'm going to put in an S tier with the assumption that the Ishizu cards are going to be cheap enough for this deck to be considered budget. The main boarded Naturia monsters are kind of cracked, especially when you don't have to tribute anymore thanks to Naturia Camellia. Ninjas, I mean, ninjas don't necessarily do anything particularly well, but it's a really fun budget deck. Draco Slayer easily, God guys, this is the deck. If you catch me playing this at YCS Pasadena, mind your fucking business. Pendulum just genuinely might be the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, that's hopium, but it's still really, really good. Ignis or Prominence, the Draco Slayer allows you to special summon from the deck and get rid of cards indiscriminately, not once per turn. Blunder Patrol, as TJ would say, it's solid B tier. We are in a light and dark format, so being able to special summon Mork or your fusion monster to your side of the field is fairly easy, and then just being able to gain advantage off of your opponent's graveyard could also happen a lot. Ironically, the B tier is decks that are effective negatively, but not too negatively by the new cards in the set, or decks that are just solid overall in budget. Prediction Princess is, I mean, you would think it'd be pay to bills instead, but I'm gonna make a bold take. This is a C tier Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Bro, Prediction Princess can summon monsters that prevent you from summoning monsters, and it makes them flip effects and can flip them face up and face down whenever they want to. Solomon Gray don't necessarily do anything very well right now. They're pretty much stuck in the exact same Cyber's category for the exception of Marine Cess. But one thing I like about their Cyber strategies is that while some of them may be down and out, one of them is normally really good. Scareclaw, another solid B tier Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It got some support for Darkwing Blast that put it in the right direction and can be mixed with Tearlament and is still really, really good. There have actually been Scareclaw Tearlament decks that have topped. Now, of course, Perlino may be completely out of your budget, but playing Tearlament Scareclaw without Perlino is not the end of the world. Sky Striker post Magnificent Mavens, I'm gonna make a huge bold claim and put it in the A tier. I think that this is one of the more powerful underrated decks, especially with players playing Eradicator Epidemic Virus a lot less. You can really get away with Widow anchoring your opponent's best monsters and then being able to Shark Cannon them to be able to make some really cool situations. The cool thing is that you can't live on Mystic Mine anymore, so you gotta actually do something with your turn. From what I've seen, also the Sky Striker Hamp card, I mean, I guess it's a kaiju? Sword Swole is finally a budget deck, unfortunately. You know what? I'm not even gonna cap. These two might be C tier. I could be biased. Sword Soul has some of the worst going first boards, mainly because once your opponent breaks him with a Dark Ruler no more, you lose. Going second, though, is a whole different story until your Ashina gets hit with a Bestial. Now, you guys are actually seeing this right. This is Tearlament without the Paralinos. This is actually I'm gonna put it in A tier. Bro, those Paleozoic cards actually allow you to make Totally Awesome, which got a reprint in Magnificent Mavens. This deck is actually really good. Tri-Brigade is another very, very solid A tier Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I genuinely think that this deck may be a lot better than what people think, but that's mainly because you can play Harpy's Featherstorm in your hand with this deck. You can activate it from your hand. All you got to do is link summon into the Harpy Link monster. You're good to go. Harpy's Featherstorm is online and you don't got to worry about Cosmic Cyclone. Umi is, oh my God, this deck is great. It even got some new support from Darkwing Blast. The new monster allows you to be able to add Umi from your graveyard to your hand and can also change its level and special summon a monster from the graveyard when Umi is on your field. I don't think that Unchained has gained anything, but I also don't think that Unchained has lost anything. I think it's a very solid B tier deck. Now, granted, Cosmic Cyclone is in the format and you don't want to be destroying cards, but there's some cards that can be destroyed. Vernal Sylph is easily a solid C tier deck. What I do like about Vernal Sylph is that it can summon a Morphage Sloth to the side of the field with a Sloth and Scale. What I don't like about this deck is that it loses to Dark Ruler no more. And then lastly would be Virtual World. I think Virtual World is a solid A tier budget deck. This deck is ridiculously cheap, and if you get yourself a hold of some of those cash tier offenders, it gives you a little bit more board breaking opportunity with some Synchro 10 plays. And that is all that I have for the budget tier list post Mama. Magnificent Mavens is going to shake up the game just a little bit, but these budget decks should be able to tide you over. Of course, if you disagree with what I have to say, go ahead and let me know, but also be sure to check out these other videos because they're amazing.